Good evening, LTL viewers. We are back here live on the live show. It is October 10th, 2023. I want to welcome everybody back into the live show. How is everybody doing this evening? I saw that Carrie's not feeling well. Carrie, feel better. What the hell, man? I'm pretty tired myself. It was like I went to bed late last night. I woke up at 5. I was going to get up. I was going to go to the gym. I ended up falling back asleep, and that's literally what killed me. The extra 2 hours of sleep. I've been bombed all day. I have no energy. I'm totally exhausted right now. So, probably not a super long show tonight, but we'll see. We'll see what we get into this. We'll see what we do when we get into this. But we're going to talk some Kohberger, Idaho 4 news tonight, Steve Goncalves, Howard Blum or Blum, however you want to say it. I believe he says it Blum. I've heard it Blum. I've heard it Blum. Potato, whatever. Guy's a dickhead. Guy's a Kohberger sympathizer. I've talked about that a bunch of times. He's been called out before for his reporting. I'll be honest with you. I was into his airmail articles, probably like 2 or 3 of them, and then I just dumped out because I knew what he was doing, inserting a lot of information in his reporting or his stories, to make them sound essentially like a movie script, like a horror story. And I've been saying that for a long time. And you can even see the pure example of that on the 48 Hours interview that he just did, the series a couple of weeks ago, inserting a lot of that. Very Kohberger sympathizing, essentially saying that there's no way that all this stuff, all this evidence that they've come up with in the PCA, the cast data is not going to matter. When a bottom line comes down to it, the cast information is not going to matter. I mean, are you fucking dumb? Have you watched the Murdoch trial? Did you watch the hour-long testimony about cast information? I think Blum needs to go back and do a little research on cast information. So, we'll get into this. I'm a little fired up tonight. Getting excited about tomorrow night's stream. I'm probably already demonetized. Let's take a look. Did YouTube demonetize me? Nope, not yet. Woo, I'm lucky. And I said some curse words in the first 6 minutes. I'm doing pretty good so far. All right. So let's do this. Court TV recently talked about Brian Kohberger's internet searches. And then, it's funny, before I get into that, it's funny. Was it 2 nights ago? Brian Kohberger was trending on Twitter. And I'm reading the tweets of these people. And I'm like, where have you been the last year? They're talking about the bank information that was pulled. They're talking about, what were some of the other things they were talking about? Talking about the possibility of the 2 roommates texting. I mean, I said that 4 months ago on my show. I'm like, where have you been? When did you start following this case? Are you completely spun? Are you completely lost? And then they're fucking melting down. Then you had the big meltdown of everybody. Oh my God, Steve Goncalves is going to blow this case wide open. Ah! And they're coming at Steve. I'm like, well, have you ever thought maybe it's Howard Blum that's putting a bunch of bullshit out there? Maybe Steve didn't say this stuff. You know, and on top of it too, is you have to look at it. There's no gag order on the families. They can talk. They can talk. But I think in the best interest, and I think they've been advised by their attorney, Shannon Gray, to not say anything. Of course. But you don't think that after a year's time that people haven't talked? You know, I heard something that I heard something that I heard something. You don't think that conversations have been made? You know, you don't think that's, you know, people have leaked things out? I mean, and that's the scary thing about this, is that so much time is going to go by. And this is what scares me. And I was saying this the other day. The most critical, important witness in this entire case, in my opinion, is Dylan Mortensen. She needs to be making a journal and going over in her head every step of everything that she experienced, heard, and saw that night, over and over and over again, almost like, you know, it's being burnt in her brain. Because as time goes on, you know this in trials, people tend to forget things. People tend to forget minute details of a particular situation. So it's definitely something, you know, that worries me. I would keep a journal. I would keep going over that information in your head, what you saw, what you smelt, what you see, you know, what you felt, the emotions you went through, you know, what you heard. So it's very, very important. Extremely important. All right, let's get to this first, and then we'll get into the articles that everybody was talking about and blowing everything up. There's been a statement by the Goncalves family that came out to retract against Howard Blum. And if I was the Goncalves family, I would put a cease and desist on Blum. I don't know if you can, or a retraction, and probably at least a retraction on Blum. I don't know if you can stop someone from reporting, but you know, Blum is a Kohberger sympathizer. I've been saying that for a long time. And that's when people refer to his articles, I just see it as like fodder, you know. It's a bunch of goofy reporting. But we'll pull up some segments of that article. I did it actually, if you are a channel member, last night I did a late night channel members only stream. And we talked a little bit of that last night. So my members actually get a little taste of this stream today. If you want to join and be a member and get exclusive, you know, before or behind the scenes content, or just exclusive only content, you can go down there, hit the join button. It's only $1.99. It's less than a Starbucks coffee to support the channel on a monthly basis. And I would appreciate that if you do. So let's do this. We'll pull up this from Court TV first. Kohberger's internet searches. Let's find out.
You read the affidavit and you just find out that nobody understands exactly why, but he was stalking them, he was hunting them.
The maximum penalty for that offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is up to death and or imprisonment for life.
Yeah, I want to stop this too, as I know everybody's talking about Blum. You know, the thing is that he's been called out now twice in this. I think the first time he was called out was when he made a statement, or in his writings, in his reporting, he made a statement about the FBI losing track of Kohberger in the first 24 or 48 hours as he went off in across the United States back to Pennsylvania. And that's false. And the FBI actually called him out, corrected him on his reporting. So, you know, Blum's a grifter. He's just someone that's going to capitalize on this, write a book and capitalize on it, make it sexy like a graphic novel, and try to make a whole bunch of money off this. You know, he's a failed reporter that you know, has to reinvigorate his journalistic his journalism, and put out all these fictitious lies and stories. And you know, it's a bunch of garbage reporting. So
yes,
this was probably a person that blends into the background.
Yeah, we're on
from Pennsylvania, we actually don't have like crosswalks.
His neighbors and people who know him superficially would probably never guess that he had any violent tendencies.
It's disgusting to think about someone that you used to hang out with all the time could do something like this.
Are you waiving your right to a speedy preliminary hearing?
Yes.
If you got to know him well, you would see layers of things that were a bit off or different.
What I do know is that Brian did have anger issues.
You could tell there was some off about him. Very quiet, calculated about what he says. Actually very similar to how he walked into court. No different.
I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to.
Oh, no, yeah, I can find it for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everything that I've read about Brian Kohberger would fit the type of person that we would expect for doing a crime like this.
All right, we've got some news tonight, some new information released, and this is the information that prosecutors are attempting to get or have received, but is now under seal. But we've got what the requests are from their warrant. First, Amazon data. Take a look. All detailed customer click activity pertaining to knives and accessories. All details of items in carts, to include all items added to the cart, all items removed or deleted from the cart, and all items saved in the cart, wish listed or shopping baskets. They want to know what the accused killer was shopping for on Amazon. Next one, very interesting. Spotify, search queries, streaming history, playlists, user library, browsing history, account settings, interactions with other Spotify users, user third-party services, devices, and applications in connection with the Spotify service. Next one is even more interesting, related to Spotify. User device sensor data to include motion-generated or orientation-generated device sensor data. Had no idea that Spotify did this, which the user device collects about the way the user moves or holds their device. Okay, from Apple, the contents of all emails.
This is so deep, and I'm going to tell you, this is going to be the wave of the future for solving crimes. That damn phone is going to get so many fucking people in trouble. It's funny. I was watching maybe 6 months ago. Joe Rogan actually read out the terms of service for TikTok. And you can look that up. Joe Rogan reads terms of service of TikTok. Unfortunately, I can't play the stream because I'll get bagged. But I urge you all to watch that. It is insane what you give permission TikTok to do on your phone, but not only your phone, other devices that it knows that you're connected to, just by your haptics, by your motions, by your keystrokes. It can detect on a what do we call this? A home computer. It knows your keystrokes and will get access to your files. It'll know if you're on a friend's computer just by your keystrokes, the way that you act, and it will get into those files. It's insane. That's why I said I would never, ever, 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 ever put TikTok on my phone. I mean, granted, YouTube knows everything about me. They got a file. Facebook has a file on all of us, but TikTok is scary shit. All right, let's keep playing through this.
Associated with the account, including stored or preserved copies of emails sent to and from the account. The contents of all instant messages associated with the account, including stored or preserved copies of instant messages, including iMessages, SMS messages, and MMS messages sent to and from the account, including all draft and deleted messages. And don't forget, folks, this is on the docket, motion to dismiss. It's a big, big hearing, October 26th. And of course, we will be covering that for you right here on Court TV. And
I mean, if you're still in the mud about this guy, if you're still unsure, I mean, you need to get off the weed. I mean, you need to get off the weed. If you're unsure about this guy, you need to get off the weed. I mean, this was so methodically planned and so calculated. I mean, if you don't think so, then why is this dude and his attorneys constantly trying to dismiss everything? Why is this dude and his attorneys constantly trying to delay everything? Stop smoking the reefer. Wake up. I mean, if you're still on the fence about this guy, I don't know what to tell you.
Closing arguments. Let's bring back in our think tank, Bernardo Villalona, Lori Murray, Ian Friedman. Ian, this is a case where no murder weapon's been recovered. We do not believe any bloody clothing has been recovered either. We're not sure what, if any, evidence was even recovered from the white Hyundai Elantra. So in light of that, and the fact that the key piece of evidence is some DNA from a knife sheath from this button snap up on top as the key really to place him at the scene, the knife sheath that was found beneath the victim's bodies. How important is this search history and this internet history, Amazon, Spotify, Apple?
I think it's critical. I mean, this is a case that technology is going to help make. I think here they've got the sheath, as you said. If there's a knife that was ordered by Amazon that fits that sheath, game over. Because that one, as defense counsel, that's going to be really tough to get around. Now you add to it all of the movements that put him in that place, search terms that are talking about it, order histories, and so forth. It's going to be a problem if all that adds up. But if that knife was ordered on Amazon, or if they're able to prove it anyway, that he had the knife that fit that sheath, and this, getting around the sheath by itself with his DNA there is tough enough. But they put that knife on order to him. Good night.
Good night.
Lori Murray, you can learn a lot about defendants these days, right? From the digital footprint, from what we're doing, what we're saying.
And you know what? I almost think he would pull a move like that because he thinks he's smarter than everybody. I'll just order it through Amazon and have it come right to my house. I don't have to walk into a store. I'm not going to be caught on a surveillance camera. And we know there's multiple Army Navy stores up and around that campus. You know, I found like 8 trading posts in and around that campus. You know, or back in Pennsylvania, I'm sure there's multiple Army Navy stores in and around where he lives. But you've concealed it that way, essentially. Send it to my home. Don't even have to go out to get it. You know?
In this case, they need as much as possible, right? This defense, it's going to be a death penalty case. The defense is fighting every issue as hard as they can. They're incredibly competent, the defense in this case. What are your thoughts about this information, this data from Amazon, Spotify, Apple?
Well, I thought that their requests were very thorough, and I was impressed by the thoroughness of it. First of all, let's talk about Apple. I don't think that they're going to find that many text messages on there because I don't think he had any friends. So you might have some emails that are, you know, spam emails, but I don't think he had a whole lot of social interaction with anybody. So Apple, you're probably not going to get much from. Spotify is interesting to me. I didn't know they kept that data either. I'm going to have to watch my Spotify. But, you know, I guess they're going to look for whether he was near the crime scene with the Spotify, whether his phone was, you know, and what orientation it was. But I think you can get that same data from Apple. So that's a little bit odd to me. But they want to hear whether he's watching shows like How to Get Away with Murder or listening to true crime podcasts and, you know, all of these, maybe they're all stabbing deaths.
Imagine if you listen to LTL. That'd be nuts. Imagine if the dude was listening to LTL. That'd be nuts.
He's listening to about on podcasts. But the most interesting one for me is the Amazon one, as it should be to everybody, because they're not only asking for this particular knife, maybe they find that he got the knife there. Maybe they find it, that is a huge magic gift that Amazon would give them. But what if he was just looking for knives? What if he just shopped around and clicked and they asked for the clicks, not just what he bought, but what they clicked. So they actually look at all of the things, and he clicked on 17 different knives that were like this one, and then went and bought it from the local store so as not to have the record of it. He's still caught. And so I think that's a really good search and a really good subpoena on behalf of the state.
All right, let's hear from Nancy and Grace talking about kill kits. Brian Koberger.
What is a kill kit?
It's a kit where the person is prepared to do what he thinks needs to be done in a murder scene. It's going to have a weapon. It may have something to bind or hold the victim in place. It's going to have maybe a tarp, a shovel, anything they want from A to B to commit this crime. There's no question that Koberger came kill ready. He had a mask, a hat, dark clothing, a knife, and a sheath. When they served the search warrant on his parents' house, he had knives and a Glock and, again, this black face mask and black gloves. He had these things. So he absolutely planned this and executed it with this kill kit.
What about it, Joe Scott? A kill kit. We've seen it. We've heard of it. What would Koberger have had in such a kill kit if it did exist?
If it did exist, my thought, and this is the big thing, because people keep talking about DNA and all these sorts of things. What I would be very interested in, Nancy, is were there any kind of barriers, like clothing barriers, he would have had in there to change with? Something to put distance, like garbage bags, for instance, if you're trying to do a quick change. Because I can tell you this, and forgive me, because this is absolutely the stuff of nightmares. What was perpetrated within that environment, and it has been alluded to, is an absolute and total bloodbath. There's no way, and I mean no way, under God's green earth, that someone could have exited that dwelling without having been just effused with blood, period. End of story. They would have had it all over them, because you can't be in this close a contact with living victims where they are fighting against you. You're stabbing them repeatedly over and over and over again. And then you're going to walk through the house down into that next landing area and repeat this again.
All right. We'll go to what happened the other day. Judge denies. Judge denies pause in Koberger, Idaho 4 case. The defense motion was an effort to dismiss the grand jury indictment. A judge called the motion premature. Koberger is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students. From News Nation, let's read about it. October 9th, a judge has denied a request for Brian Koberger to pause the case against him. Koberger is accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students. Judge John Judge denies the motion as too premature. Koberger's lawyer filed the motion in efforts to dismiss the grand jury indictment against him, arguing for dismissal because only 32 jurors were brought in to hear the case rather than 45. The judge said that it did not constitute a substantial failure to comply with the grand jury proceedings and denied the request. Koberger's team has 37 days to review the evidence and decide if they wish to renew the motion to stay. A lot of delaying in this case. Lots of delaying. Koberger, who was graduate, we already know his background. We're going to go into this. The deaths of the 4 students shocked the country as initially there were a few leads on what happened to the group. Koberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania after investigators used familial DNA. We already know that. That's it. Just going to talk a little bit about the dismissal. Koberger enters the courtroom arraignment hearing in Latah County District Court on May 22nd, 2023 in Moscow, Idaho. Koberger is accused of, we know all that. But that's it. Judges denied it. Delaying the case. That's all he wants to continue to do. Delay the case. All right, let's get into some of the controversial articles that everybody was pissing and moaning about on Twitter. I found that a little hilarious. Everybody was freaking out on Twitter the other night. All right, Newsweek. This is the one that I really was hearing about. And I think probably a lot of it is that people don't have access or know what airmail is. I was watching some of JLR stuff earlier, and he said it's behind a paywall. It's not. You can go over and get to airmail. You just put your email address in. You can read all Howard Blum's articles. But this is the one that was being circulated all over Twitter the other night, and it has a lot of what Blum was talking about. So, written back on the 7th at 3 a.m., the missing Brian Kohberger evidence that could make or break the trial. Dun dun dun. Let's do this. I'm gonna play it. I'm not gonna read it. Let's play it. I've never done this before.
Just a quick word from our sponsor.
Oh, we got a sponsor.
Impress even the toughest critics with Bona. When you clean your floors with Bona's uniquely formulated plant-based floor cleaners, you can impress the unimpressible with your beautiful clean floors. Find out more at Bona.com. Bona, for floors that impress.
Bona.com.
The missing Brian Kohberger evidence that could make or break the trial, by Sean O'Driscoll. They were found lifeless together on the bed, Kaylee Goncalves and her best friend, Madison Maddie Mogan, both 21, and on another floor of the Moscow, Idaho house. Police found the bodies of 2 other students, Shauna Kernodle, 20, and Kernodle's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, 20. Now, an expert told Newsweek there is one piece of evidence missing that could make or break the trial. Mogan was leaning on Goncalves' shoulder. Goncalves had been having a sleepover in Mogan's third-floor room on the night of November 13, 2022, when an unknown killer stabbed both women to death. On the bed beside their bodies, Moscow police officer Brett Payne noticed a tan leather knife sheath that is now central to the case against Brian Kohberger, who has been charged with all 4 murders at the student house on King Road. The sheath itself is a vital clue. It had Kabar USMC and the United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it, Officer Payne wrote in a signed statement submitted in court. Police speculate that the killer may have been startled to find 2 women in the bed and that Goncalves may have put up a fight, during which the killer was slightly injured and dropped the knife sheath in the confusion. A housemate downstairs, frozen with fear, saw a man wearing a COVID mask over his mouth walk by her and leave the house via the glass door at the back. He was a white male with bushy eyebrows. He wasn't muscular, she told police, but was slim and athletic. According to Payne's legal submissions, police immediately began a troll of CCTV footage in the area and very quickly focused on a white car speeding down the street very soon after the murder. Officer Payne said he knew the Moscow street where the murders took place and knew that it was quiet and would rarely have traffic on it in the early hours of the morning. When they put all the videos together, a picture began to emerge. The car had no front number plate, which is required by law in Idaho but not in some other states, such as Pennsylvania. The police took the video footage to an FBI officer who specializes in identifying vehicles. Not only was the officer an expert on types and makes of vehicles, but he also knew that there were regional differences in the same make of car. Sometimes a certain part may be used for cars sold in one part of America but not in another. The FBI agent initially identified the car as a Hyundai Elantra made between 2011 and 2014, but after reviewing the footage over and over looking for small clues, he expanded his range from 2011 to 2016. While he was doing that, Moscow police were studying the likely journey the car took after the murders. The car turned onto several other streets and then disappeared from CCTV footage. That led them to believe it had turned onto a ramp that would lead the driver on the road to Pullman in Washington state, another college town 10 minutes down the road. As Officer Payne observed, there were strong ties between the 2 towns, and students often traveled from one town to another to see each other. With that, a massive police search moved to Pullman. A search of the CCTV footage from the college in Pullman and a private residence front porch shows a white Elantra showing up about 10 minutes after the suspect Elantra left Moscow. It drives through several Pullman streets before disappearing from view. Eventually, a Pullman police officer identified a white Elantra belonging to student Brian Kohberger, originally from Pennsylvania. From the driveway, the officer could see that the car had no front license plate. Officer Payne ran a computer search and, from Kohberger's driver's license photo, could see that he was a slim white male with bushy eyebrows. He also pulled Kohberger's phone number from the police computer. Kohberger had been stopped for speeding in Moscow and his phone number was in their computer system. From there, the phone company was able to provide phone tower records, which can tell police where a person has traveled. To the police's dismay, the phone showed no record of being near the murder house that night. Payne believed Kohberger could have left the phone in Pullman, where it had earlier pinged local phone towers, or he may have switched it to airplane mode and brought it with him to Moscow. Either way, Payne believed it pointed to someone who knew how to avoid detection. Kohberger was placed under covert police and FBI surveillance, and they discovered that he would be traveling back to Pennsylvania in his Elantra. Several teams were instructed to follow him across America and never let him out of their sight. In an incident that is still clouded in mystery, a traffic policeman stopped Kohberger's car and spoke to him briefly. The officer was wearing a body cam, and Officer Payne was quickly able to review the video footage and establish that Kohberger had bushy eyebrows. It was important for police to see what he looked like in real life and not simply rely on a driver's license photo. We still don't know if this was a genuine police stop or, given the speed with which the body cam footage was recovered, a police ploy to get a closer look at Kohberger. The knife sheath came back from touch DNA analysis. It was from a male. The police still didn't have Kohberger's DNA to compare to the knife sheath and didn't want to arouse Kohberger's suspicion, especially as they wanted to see if he would dispose of the knife somewhere on the drive across America. As far as they could tell, he didn't. When he was back at the family home in Pennsylvania, he remained under 24-hour surveillance, and police saw him empty out the trash in the early hours of the morning. When he went back into the house, they carefully sifted through the garbage. There was no knife or anything incriminating. Lab technicians did, however, extract a DNA sample from a food sample in the trash. The lab results showed that Kohberger's father could not be excluded as the source of the DNA. That may not sound significant, but 99.9999% of all people could be excluded from the sample. Police were satisfied it was Kohberger's father's DNA. From there, police found that there was a family link to the Idaho knife sheath. Whoever touched the knife in Mugen's room was an offspring of Kohberger's father. Kohberger was soon arrested and remains in detention. However, there are still significant gaps in the investigation, and Kohberger is entitled to a presumption of innocence. Police are still stuck on a major question: where is the murder knife? Nobody knows. Documents released last week show that police had been seeking all of Kohberger's search records for the word knife, all of his wish lists on online shopping sites, and all of his online purchases, in the hope of finding that he purchased a knife that matches the sheath found in the Idaho murder house. Amazon and other tech companies have handed over records, and those are now stored in the Moscow Police Department. Their contents are not yet publicly known. Throughout month after month of this intense forensic investigation, Kohberger has stayed silent. He has not spoken to police in interviews and didn't enter a plea when asked to do so in court. Instead, a not guilty plea was entered on his behalf by the Idaho court. According to former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani, who is now president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, the lack of murder weapon does not sink the case against Kohberger. Prosecutors would love to have the murder weapon, especially any DNA on it, but it's not fatal to their case. They'll argue that Kohberger is more sophisticated than your typical accused murderer and probably disposed of it somehow, Rahmani told Newsweek. He also said that Kohberger's likely silence at trial may work against him, even though he is legally entitled not to speak. Even though jurors are instructed that they can't infer guilt from the defendant's silence, implicitly it may have an effect. That's why we're seeing a trend with more defendants taking the stand, particularly in high-profile cases like Elizabeth Holmes and Alex Murdaugh, he said. Newsweek has emailed Kohberger's public defense attorney for comment. Update October 7, 2023, 3:35 p.m. ET. This article was updated to reflect that the DNA sample found in the murder house was touch DNA. Just a quick word from our sponsor.
No more sponsors, because I ain't sponsored. So that got everybody in a hoopla. Nothing really new. People were quoting it. And then the big one was the Inside Edition article, and we'll get to that here. It says Bryan Kohberger murder trial. Surviving students were awake and texting while roommates massacred. Report. I have my theory about the text messaging, and I have my theory about the texting. And I talked about this about 4 or 5 months ago on this channel, and I'll play a little bit of that segment and give you my really full theory on that. So here's Inside Edition. A father of one of the victims learned that the two survivors allegedly had not been awake while the killings had taken place, but they had heard everything, reports Airmail. The two survivors of the brutal University of Idaho murders were allegedly awake on their phone texting as their former roommates were killed, according to a new report. This information allegedly comes from Steve Goncalves, the father of victim Kaylee Goncalves. He allegedly learned this information from an individual who serves in the grand jury that voted to indict suspect Bryan Kohberger on 4 counts of murder in the deaths of Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. That's where people were fucking losing their shit. And I was like, what? Understandably so. Yet Steve had been told that the two survivors allegedly had not been awake while the killings had taken place, but that they had heard everything, reports Airmail. Most astonishing, the grand jury sources alleged that the two girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from room to room, one room to the next. The article goes on to claim that Goncalves found a person who could explain the reason for this, but was stopped by contacting them by the FBI. The witness had originally reached out to one of the authorities through a tip line that promised to protect the identities of anyone volunteering information, and the Bureau was duty-bound to honor their commitment, reports Airmail. And the letter went on to make clear, with the intimidating force, the fact that Steve was the father of one of the victims and gave them no dispensation of legal consequences that accompany tampering with the government witness. Inside Edition Digital is unable to confirm any of this information with police or prosecutors due to a gag order that prohibits them from speaking publicly about the case. The Moscow Police Department said from the start that 6 people had been sleeping in the off-campus home the night of the massacre. In the 6 weeks after the murder, however, police said that 2 women survived had been asleep, according to the authorities. This information appeared in the daily updates that were handed out to the public and press prior to the arrest of suspect Bryan Kohberger. The statement changed, though, on December 30th, when Corporal Brett Payne of the Moscow Police Department wrote in a probable cause affidavit seeking the arrest warrant for Bryan Kohberger that one of the women survived on November 13th massacre saw someone that night. DM stated she opened the door for the 3rd time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her, says the affidavit. That is a different account than what Moscow Police Department included in the daily reports. It was released on the investigation into the University Idaho murders. So what? Evidence changes all the time. Evidence changes as you gather more information. Evidence and statements are going to change based on the evidence. The Moscow Police Department updated release to the press and the public on November 20th reads, detectives believes that on November 12th, the 2 surviving roommates had also been out in Moscow community separately, but returned home by 1 a.m. on November 13th. The 2 did not wake up until later the next morning. That information is included as part of the investigation timeline in every subsequent release put out by MPD until December 20th, at which time the timeline is no longer included in part of their daily update. 10 days later, Payne stated that his affidavit that one of the surviving roommates was not only awake, but possibly an eyewitness to the case. DM described a figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock phase, says the probable cause affidavit. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in a room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murder left the scene. Kohberger has been scheduled to go to trial earlier this month, but there have been delays in the case. If convicted on any of the murder charges, he could face the death penalty. The 28-year-old who was prior to the murders has been working on his doctorate in criminology at WSU, told previous public defenders that he expects to be exonerated at trial. In May, he declines to enter a plea, being formally charged on 4 counts of murder. The judge in the case entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. So that's that. I mean, what do you think? I don't think that Steve put out information. Like I said, Blum is someone that doesn't, is a Kohberger sympathizer, in my opinion. We'll pale through some of this Airmail. His shit is so long, so we'll go into this if you haven't seen it. In Cold Blood, The Eyes of a Killer. After a few false leads, and a grieving father turns amateur sleuth discovers the prosecution's hidden ace. This was released on the 7th, and he says it's 21-minute read, but I'm not going to read all of it here. We'll just kind of scroll through it. Let's see. What was some of the things that I was reading the other night? Despite the late hour, segment the barrel chest of the... Let's see. As it happened, Kaylee's call solved the mystery. No one knew what happened, and I'm in absence of the real-life information. Increasingly fevers internet speculation flourishes now. And summer trigger. Less than a month earlier, in dreary pre-dawn darkness of November 13, 2022, Kaylee and her best friend Maddie, who might as well have been another daughter to him, and his wife, and the two other university students, Xana and Ethan, were gruesomely stabbed to death in the house, a stone's throw from the heart of the campus. An unknown killer, or killers, he wondered, is still at large, and it was inconsolable loss and unfathomable crime. Steve struggled to make sense of his emotions. In the aftermath of his daughter's murder, the anger roiled, raw and unfeathered. One day, he railed with an uncomprehending anguish at the cosmic injustice of us all. You can't imagine sending your girl to college and they come back in an urn. He grieved openly to a group of reporters. You're numb. You're absolutely amount of pain and agony. Next, he chose the target of conspicuous, lackluster manner of which he decided law enforcement attempting to solve the murders. I don't feel confident. His response to the vehement candor when he was asked the news show about the police investigation. And that's why I pushed the envelope and I say a little bit more. All right, let's get down here. Let's see. Even disheartened after years. And as Steve's investigation ran forward, it was just a brief matter of time, a week or two, it was almost, before the quest became, with another amateur, own deep dive into the events of the fateful night in Moscow. And perhaps the alliance had been preordained too, for just as fathers are often drawn to follow their daughters' footsteps, so do daughters on the occasion to emulate their dads. Yet, as Olivia tells it, she never had paid much attention to how her father earned his living. The fact that he'd been a hard charging crime reporter in the native Chicago, Olivia explained to me, and then had gone to the career as both a reporter and the outlet. So let's see, 22 years of stream, the formal journalist, TikTok and YouTube. Yeah, this is the Chronicles Olivia article, YouTube video they're talking about here. Steve had discovered this connection with his oldest daughter. So they discovered persistence of calls in the wee hours of the morning from Kaylee to her ex-boyfriend, Jack DeCore. Calls and then gone unanswered. Star-crossed young romance, or could it be something more ominous? This fucking guy. Steve quickly passed the intelligent two on to the cops. Yet when the Moscow PD similarly hooked Jack up to a lie detector, administrating and DNA swab to compare the evidence found at the crime scene, he passed both examinations with flying colors, according to one of Steve's friends. So if anybody has ever denied Jack DeCore, he took a lie detector test and he took a DNA sample. So get that off your fucking list. Steve, however, is still not completely assured. Nothing about the murders made any sense. Everything seemed so possible. Let's see. But Steve was not done, caught up in his newfound forensic professionalism. In the days that followed, Steve tracked down Hunter Johnson, Chapin's frat brother, as the best friend. Just before noon on November 13th, Johnson had been summoned by two distraught survivors to the King Road house, where he discovered Ethan's body. Days later, he gave his eyewitness accounts to Steve as a soldier might, straightforward, factual, but without either embellishment or emotion. It is only when he finished that the two men, both overwhelmed at the last convulsed into tears. Steve also made a point to knock on doors of the houses adjacent to the murder scene and interrogating the neighbors. I don't think that's interrogating. I think he probably was just asking fucking questions if he was doing anything, like any father would. If her fucking daughter was brutally murdered 24 hours prior to that, yeah, I probably would start knocking on some doors. You know, hey, did you see anything? Did you hear anything? So I don't think that's interrogating. I think that's just asking questions. He was going through. He was going where he felt he had to go, but his mission had only not produced a desired result. Over a month he passed, and there had been no arrests, only vague statements about a missing Hyundai Elantra that had been spotted near the King Road house the night of the murders. The authorities had yet to name a suspect, and it was infuriating. The prospect of his daughter's murder becoming one more cold case, excuse me, was torture. All right, let's see here. Talking more about the YouTube video here. But Steve Goncalves has found neither resignation nor acceptance. The arrest of the suspect, in fact, brought not a sense of finality, but only brewing reinstatements to further nagging questions. For one thing, he remains determined to make sure that the authorities have arrested the right man. And while he has grown increasingly convinced that Kohberger was involved in the crime, Steve remains open to the possibility that others might have been involved, according to text provided to Airmail. It seems to him quite possible that there were more perpetrators in the house on King Road on that night of his daughter and his friends were killed, and if they were, they must be still at large. I've never heard Steve say that. Let's see. There was some really good stuff that I read here the other night that I think was the thing that really riled up Steve in all of this. Yeah, this was the drug ring thing. One, the internet theories suggesting the drug ring had been involved in the killings were ludicrous. No pro is going to rough up someone just knowing who all is in that house. He texted a friend. There had been pointed out usually that the three girls in the King Road house, his daughter who had completed her coursework and would graduate in January and had just come down to Moscow for a weekend on a whim to show Maddie her new Range Rover, explained to me how a hitman missed Ethan and Kaylee's new car. A professional would have been daunted by the presence of two additional people in the house that night. As for the rumors of a drug deal gone bad being the underlying motive, Steve had been told by the authorities that the toxicity reports for all four victims established that they had no drugs in their systems, because if they wanted to score some pot, there would be no need to get involved with a street dealer. The kids, he pointed out, could go down the street in an 8 miles where there's a store. They could just easily buy it, despite the fact that marijuana remains illegal in Idaho. Christy, his wife, went to them once to check it out, and she texted a friend. Let's see. This was interesting right here. So in the process, he compiled a startling revelation, hard-won information that he triumphantly disclosed to his newfound internet associates. Kohberger had purchased a dark blue Dickies long sleeve work uniform at Walmart in Pullman, Washington, not long before the murders, Steve had learned. The authorities had a copy of the $49.99 receipt, and they'd also now had a theory to explain how Kohberger had managed to escape the crime scene without a scratch and without leaving an incriminating drop of blood in his getaway car or his apartment. He had worn the work uniform during the murders, and then he had disrobed before he got back behind the wheel of his Hyundai Elantra for his circuitous drive back to his apartment. Perhaps the authorities hypothesized that he stuffed the work suit into a plastic garbage bag and then shoved it into his trunk. Only there was no sign of the Dickies outfit. The police had looked high and low, but they couldn't find it. They just couldn't locate the murder weapon. They had a receipt for a K-bar knife he had purchased online months before the killings, but this too had seemingly vanished. And long as the two critical pieces of evidence remain unavailable, Steve feared that building the case against Koberger would remain more open than shut. So Blum is reporting that the police have a receipt of the K-bar knife that he supposedly purchased months before the killings. So Blum is putting that out there. And he's saying Steve said this. Let's see here. Even more troubling, if true, is what Steve had learned from people who had spoken to members of the grand jury who had been present with the prosecution's case. It is centered on the alleged behavior of the two roommates who had miraculously survived the night unscathed. How, he wondered, could they have slept blissfully unaware through the savage pre-dawn stabbing murders of 4 people in the narrow house with paper-thin walls. Later, a police affidavit revealed that one of the survivors, Dylan Mortensen, had in fact heard noises and left her room only to spot a masked, darkly clad intruder making his way through the residence before retreating to her room and did not summon help for another 8 hours for reasons that have never been revealed. Yet Steve had been told that 2 survivors allegedly had not only been awake while the killings had taken place, but they heard everything. More astonishingly, the grand jury sources alleged that the 2 girls had been texting one another as the murders methodically went from one room to the next. I've had a theory about that, and I'm going to play that in a second. This is something that Laura and I talked about probably like 5 months ago here on the channel. And I still truly believe in that. And I think that's why they obviously they downloaded the phones, but I think that helped in aiding the timeline because I think they were texting. I think there was some texting going on. I feel in my heart of heart that there was some texting going on. I don't know what to the level of it was. And maybe Blum is embellishing it and making it seem like it's a lot bigger. But there is a possibility that they definitely were texting. So I'm gonna play that segment in a second. The possibility that 2 people had a sense of horror while occurred and had not acted, calling neither friends nor 911 left Steve floored, and no less confounding that they had, if his sources were knowledgeable, he believed that let 1 hour after hour tick away before they finally decided to summon friends. It added to the entire brand new band of mystery to the crime that already bound unanswered question. And so Steve intensified the efforts to get answers, and in his dogged process, he came to believe that the government must have protected source and informant that could provide testimony and would tighten the screws that held together the case against Koberger. Steve was determined to talk to them. He did not want to wait for the trial to get knowledge he needed for his peace of mind, if needed relief now. And after doing some digging, he grew convinced that he had an informant in his sights. He was preparing to reach out to this individual to get the right in his face and confront him. He would explain that he had empowered by his father's natural right to understand fully the last moments of his daughter's life. In fact, it was his duty. It was an argument he felt and that no one could reject. And at last, he would know the whole story of what really happened to Kaylee and why. I mean, we're never going to really know. We're never going to really know, unfortunately. We weren't there. But we can piece things together. But before he could make this move, before he could get in the room and have the heart-to-heart to talk, he was unexpectedly stopped in his tracks by the FBI. The Bureau had sent an official letter to Steve's attorney in Moscow, Shannon Gray, warning that if there had been any attempts to contact the individual Steve had been pursuing, that there would be legal consequences. The witness had originally reached out to the authorities through a tip line that promised to protect the identity of anyone volunteering information, and the Bureau was duty-bound to the honor of that commitment. And the letter went on to make clear that an intimidating force, that the fact Steve was the father of one of the victims, gave him no dispensation from legal consequences that accompany tampering with the government's witness. Let's see. Promise to stand, step back from her, memories of the past, dreams. Their father Gonzalez Facebook page, wife and his daughter Olivia, is unforgiving promise Steve is making yet. Yeah, so that's some of the stuff there that had come out that Blum was reporting, or Blum, however you want to say it. And yeah, then there had been a statement put out by Steve's attorney. And this is from KHQ. KHQ. Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. Carrie just gifted out 5 memberships. Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate you. You are the best. You are the best. Thank you. Welcome to the membership group, new members. You can go on my homepage and see all of my members only content. Members only content. Okay, let's just read this statement that the Goncalves family put out via Shannon Gray. So, investigate reporter accused of spreading falsehoods in University of Idaho murder series. I'm going to enlarge this here so we can all read it. It goes on to say, Moscow, Idaho, the father of Kaylee Goncalves, one of the 4 University Idaho students murdered last November, accused an investigative journalist of spreading falsehoods in a series of TV appearances. In a digital publication series, The Eyes of the Killer, Howard Blum also reports that on the Moscow murders, he claims that Steve Goncalves is conducting his own investigation into the murders of conjunction with the official investigators conducted by law enforcement. Shannon Gray, the attorney for the Goncalves family, said he went on to say that Blum accuses Goncalves of taking liberties with the case, potentially jeopardizing Brian Kohberger's case. I just want to recognize this super sticker from Julie. Julie, thank you so much for your contribution here on the LTL podcast. I really do appreciate that. And let me just give her a little cash, homie. Thank you. Let's see. In the statement from the Goncalves lawyer, Steve denounces of what Blum states in his publication, saying that Blum is profiting from his dead daughter and his family's grief. I just want to make it clear to the public that we have not spoken to Blum about the deaths of our daughter. There is nothing more than grandstanding and a very, very poor attempt at getting attention. This piece is obviously fictional, but written in poor taste. The Goncalves family would ask that everyone please respect the victims of this tragedy and continue to support trustworthy journalism, Goncalves said in a statement to Nonstop Local. Blum has contacted the Goncalves family for an interview, which they say they have declined multiple times. So that kind of tells you right there, with Blum saying that he was confirming text messages from the Goncalves family, that could just be a bunch of bullshit. You know, if they're saying that they've declined multiple times, maybe he's saying stuff like that to goat them, to goat them into talking to him. I don't know. I often think in some types of cases like this, and, I think there's one side, there's the other side, and then when it comes together, that's the story in the middle, so maybe there's some type of falling out. I know that Blum was really sympathetic to Kohberger during the 48 hours interview. So maybe maybe the Goncalves family was talking to Blum before, on a limited level. And then you get into that 48 hours interview, the newest episode that we saw about 3 weeks ago, and he was really sympathizing with Kohberger, saying that the cast information is not going to make any difference. Putting all these details together, all this random information, it's just all circumstantial. Maybe this pissed off the Goncalves family and they're like, fuck him. The next hearing, a quadruple murder. I mean, you got to think everybody's very their emotions are very high in this case. I can't blame the Goncalves family at all. I mean, they've lost their daughter. She's gone. She's never coming back. And I always say this too, is that our lives go on. Our lives go on. Their lives stop. And they will have to think about this. They'll have to think about this, for the rest of their lives. Every single day they will live with this. So I often lie sometimes as these things go on, as trials take longer to go and there's people writing books and stuff like that. I often think that sometimes, just like I said, there's his story, their story, and it lies somewhere in between. That's usually how the truth all comes out. So the next hearing for the quadruple murder suspect Brian Kohberger is set for October 26th. We already know that. So that was a statement from the Goncalves family in reaction to Blum or Bloom, however you want to pronounce it. Potato. Let me play this segment for about 4 months ago. Me and Laura and I. This was back on, when was this? What's the date? May 13th, 2023. And it's funny, in this stream we talked, this stream is called The Encounter. Did Xana Kernodle encounter alleged killer Brian Kohberger in the kitchen? And what I'm going to do is I'll drop the link for that if anybody's interested in going back and actually watching that stream. I mean, Laura and I talked about this stuff months ago. I mean, we pretty much nailed it down. I think that, our theory and our hypothesis is pretty damn straight on. We're going to talk about the text messaging. And I think they were. I think they were text. I think there was some text messages that night. Let's hear it. I want everybody to pay attention. I want everybody to read this. I'm wearing the same fucking hat. Look at that. It's an opinion. It's alleged. The final mention of Funk in the affidavit states that the police reviewed forensic downloads from her phone to determine the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Forensic downloads to determine that the homicides happened between these times. They were fucking texting each other. Just going to stop this real quick, because we have 200 people in the room tonight. I'm just going to let everybody know this. If you are not getting my notifications, hear me loud and clear. If you are interested in watching my podcast live, I would suggest you doing this. Just come to my page at 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's usually when I do my live streams, pretty much on a nightly basis. So you don't have to wait for notifications. Just come to LTL Podcast, look on the homepage. You'll see if I'm live. If I'm live, jump into the chat. I've been speaking about this for the last 2 months. Everybody keeps saying, I'm not getting your notifications, I stream almost every single night at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. Every single night. I'm pretty much here. Lately, my schedule has been a little wanky because I just started a new job, but almost every single night I am here. So if you're not getting notifications, just come to my homepage. Just click on my homepage, and it's going to show that I'm probably live. 8:15 Eastern Standard Time, 9:15 Eastern Standard Time on a nightly basis, or you can check within that time. All right, let's play this.
Did you hear that?
Did you hear that? They were texting each other because there's timestamps on those texts. I fully believe this. They probably heard noises. Now, I'm not going to go anywhere and say they're involved and they set all this up and blah, 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 blah. But it leads me to believe, based on this information, there were some text conversations going on. Did you hear that? Are you up?
If they were asleep, or say even if Bethany was asleep, yeah, I mean, we're just talking about Bethany right now. If she was asleep at that time, there wouldn't be anything going on her phone between 4 and 4:25 or whenever she fell asleep until whenever she woke up. So why,
based on the forensic downloads of their phones, I'm so passionate, that they would determine between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. There's timestamps. They were talking to each other. It has to be it. Or they were texting their roommates going, what's going on? What's going on? or there's phone calls. What's going on up there? Brendan thinks it's crazy. It's, I think in a good way. Wow, that's crazy. You know, that reaction. But it's quite possible this is what happened. And this, like, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show the chat. Here's the chat that we spitballed. I said to you, I somehow think Bethany Funk has something on her phone. And then I clipped this little thing that I just put up. The final mention of Funk's affidavit. The police say the forensic downloads her phone. And the information on her phone leads the police think what time the crimes happened. She's got something. And you said right away, she and Dylan were texting, and I went, bingo. I miss Laura.
We have a chat in here from Bobby Old Dude. I don't know if you can bring it up. It says, if Xana
bingo. Hang on one second. When I had that moment, I said to Laura, I went, bing, bing, bong, bong, bing, bing, bing. I'm sorry. Who is it?
Bobby Old Dude. If Xana walked to the kitchen, wouldn't she have turned a light on, meaning it wouldn't have been dark when DM looked out? They had that good vibes light in the living room.
Yeah,
So
it lit up pretty well.
Yeah, Xana would have probably been able to see her way out there. We don't know. I mean, and I believe there were also Christmas lights strung in the kitchen. So yeah, she should have she saw enough to see a black figure, a figure clad in black. I don't know if she would have seen anything at that moment in time from her doorway, because everything would have happened so fast.
So, you know, and here you go too. You know, Paul is saying there's a rumor that's saying that probably because someone figured all this out, you know, and it just took us a little while to go over it. But that's like I said, Laura and I look through that PCA at least once a week, and we spitball what could have happened. This makes a lot of sense to me. I still believe it. I think there was some texting going on. I really do. To the level of what happened, I don't know. But I do believe it. A lot of sense. It makes sense. It's because right there, it says so it right there. The downloads from her phone from Bethany's phone determined that the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4. What other information would they have on there? She's fucking sleeping. I'm so passionate.
Yeah.
They were texting. There was some communication. Did you hear that? What is that? What's going on? What's that noise? Calling her upstairs roommates.
And sadly, that just leads us to more questions. If they were texting and saying, what was that? Or the thud that was heard, why nothing else till later in the morning? Why? And you know, I give these young ladies the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I think we all want to know why. Why was nobody called until the next morning? Why didn't, Bethany say, what was that? And Dylan said, nothing. We don't know. We don't know what those text messages were. I'm sure that will come out in a trial. I said a trial whenever we get there. And we'll all be right there at the edge of our seats thinking back to this night. Why would they think? Well, they wouldn't. I mean, that's not a common thought, but
I'm sure if I'm downstairs in the bottom floor and I'm hearing a bunch of, I mean, this is the thing that people have to understand. It was so loud in that house. Yeah, it was. That got picked up through walls. Yeah. And picked up on a camera that was next door. And that's why I dismissed the fact that it was so quiet that night. It wasn't. It was loud. I mean, let me drop you on the floor right now and sound, what that's going to sound like on a wood floor. That's going to reverberate through a house. And you're going to hear a struggle. You're probably going to hear some screaming and some crying. A lot of commotion going on. Ethan was a big dude. I'm sure you probably wrestled a little bit, or maybe he just didn't even see it coming and that was it. But so Crossreach says very possible, but the 8-hour time gap is a huge problem. And how does that fit into the PCA suggested Kohberger is a suspect? I don't know. The 8-hour gap is the next thing that we're trying to work on. And we just don't have enough information there. All right, I'm going to stop that there. But yeah, I mean, that was good times. I supposedly looked thinner back then. I probably was. I've gained like 10 pounds. My weight always constantly fluctuates. So thanks for calling me a fatty, by the way, Buttercup. Oh boy. It's funny. I've been actually texting. I've actually been texting Laura a lot lately. We've been talking a little bit more. She's just been super busy. I've been trying to get her on here, but I know she's super, super busy. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but I'm going to do this. I think that's going to probably end tonight's stream. Real quick, short one. I didn't really have too much after that, but I do want to do this. I'm going to do a members only right now. I'm going to drop that link for my members. If you want to head on over there, we'll do a members only for a little bit. I like to spend some time with my members, and we're going to talk a little bit about tomorrow night's stream and get ready for that. But that's it. I think tomorrow. Yes, Turtle Boy tomorrow. I'm going to drop the link for that. That is not one you're going to want to miss, because that's going to be a highly, highly, highly watched stream. And I think it's going to be a great one. I have plenty of time tomorrow to prepare for it. So go over tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll have Turtle Boy over it, and he's going to talk Karen Reed with us. The link that I just dropped in for my for my channel members, head over there right now. I'm going to switch over to that stream. It's going to be a members only. If you want to hang out and be part of that crew, you can just click the join button right now down below. $1.99. We're going to continue some of this conversation in the members only chat, and talk about tomorrow's stream. So that's going to be it. That's going to be it. Join a member, be a member. It's only $1.99. $1.99, $1.99. I'm going to drop the link one more time for the members. Hope you all can make it. Let's get like 100 of us in there. That'd be great. Members only. We'll hang out a little bit tonight. Members only. Link is right there for members only. I'm going to shut this one down and pop it into that stream, and we'll go from there. All righty. Thanks for joining the stream, everybody. I appreciate it. We'll see you back tomorrow night. If you're not a member, if you're a member, you can head over right now into the members only. If you're not, we'll see you tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Definitely not going to want to miss that stream. It's going to be exciting. Great panel guest. And we're going to talk Karen Reed. All right. Bye.